Where are we going?
Back in time. Somewhere we'll have the advantage.
Greetings everybody and welcome back to a brand new episode of Some Bond Geek Talks About with me, your host, the name's Stevens, Henry Stevens. Everybody, how'd you do? Hope you're all well, hope you're enjoying a good Bond film, a good Bond book, a good Bond video game, a good James Bond, whatever interests you everybody. Because today we're going to discuss why I think we should send Bond back in time. But before we discuss it everybody, can I just ask, this is my customary beg, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, can I ask, why not? Why not subscribe to the channel? Why don't you click on the subscribe button down below after you've liked, commented, subscribed, of course. Click the notification bell icon to see future updates and videos. And as always, everybody, just from me to you, a massive thank you for being here and being part of the Some Bond Geek Talks About community. Right, everybody, look. There's no doubt in my mind, when I think of my childhood connection to James Bond, two things come up. One, watching the James Bond films a lot with my grandfather. As you know, if you follow me for a while, you know that me and my grandfather were very close. We used to watch the Bond films together. His era of Bond, the one he liked the most, was the 1960s. You know, Sean Connery was the James Bond. He loved the 60s stuff. Didn't mind the 70s, 80s, you know, 90s Bond films at all. But, you know, the 60s was his thing. It was really, really important to him like that. And weird enough, I did a video, it's been a while back now, about the directions that the Bond series can go in next. Now, I discussed many ideas during this video, but one idea I just put in just for the sake of, you know, just covering all bases. I can see it just watching the video, actually. The more I thought about it, the more I thought, this is an idea that's been around for a bit. But it's actually, I think, a bloody good idea. And that's essentially this. When Daniel Craig finishes his tenure, cut it off there. Little pocket universe of 5 films. Let's do another complete and utter reboot again. But this time, let's take James Bond back in time. Let's take him back to the 1960s when the franchise started. Heck, go to the time of the book, to the 1950s. And start Bond again in that time period and do some interesting and different stuff with him there. It's a nice idea in my opinion. It's got a lovely little concept and some potential to it. And the more I've been thinking about it since then, the more I think this is, without a doubt, I think one of the most genius, brilliant ideas to do. Because I think it opens so many possibilities. So let's discuss the reasons why I think this will be really good. Now, the first reason I'll say is this. I think it will take James Bond back to his roots. Now, what I mean by that is how obviously Ian Fleming created these books, you know, the James Bond books in the 1950s and 60s. So that's where Bond really belongs, you know. And the series have always done a great job of modernising Bond, keeping with the times, but the idea that you can maybe take your character away from certain things that is now causing it maybe a bit of an issue to some, and again, I say to some, and taking back to a time when you can go, well, you know what, this might not be what, you know, we do nowadays, but it was a thing of the times, and Bond is back in this time, so, you know what, that's how we're going to run with it. It can open up, I think, the potential to do quite a lot of interesting things. Or, on another side of that, you can go, you know what, we have much more better, you know, female characters, you can say now, a bit more, you know, better, I won't say standards, but different, you know, viewpoints on things. Now you can bring that stuff back into the 1960s and do some different stuff there with it. I think it could be really, really interesting to take Bond back to his roots because, again, you can do stuff in the 1960s that you can't really do now. In the 1960s movies, you could have much more of these gigantic volcano layers and these great outlandish plans about nuclear warheads. You know, the Cold War can be back and used, you know, potentially. You know, there is so much great possibilities. One of the things people do say about this idea is how, well, you know what, the reason the Bond series has survived, and they are correct, is how it stayed, you know, very up to date and modern and moved with the times. And the answer to that is, you're absolutely right. I can't deny that. You are right, and that's one of the reasons I love it. But there was a film recently that really sort of changed my mind on this whole situation. That was 2019's film, Joker. Now, I know it's not really a Bond film, but just let me say this right now. Joker was my favourite film of 2019. Without a shadow of a doubt, I loved the film Joker. And what I loved about it is how, even though it was set in the 1970s, it took modern day themes and modern day issues, sort of an allegory version of it, into the 1970s, and with the character of the Joker. And it works really well. I mean, you know, there's still political unrest in America, annoyingly. I've got friends in America who keep telling me that. And, you know, I think, you know, if you can do a film that has a lot of modern day problems and just putting in a different time setting and still attack them and talk about them and make a story about them, then if Joker can do it, why can't James Bond? An example, just literally off the top of my head, everybody, is global warming is still an issue to many, myself included. I'd love to do as much as we can to save the planet within reason. And you could do a story set in the 1960s about global warming. You know, you could do a story about, in the 1960s, about how technology might eventually take over society. You know, there are so many other things you could do, you know, that you can do that are modern day issues. Just put them in the 1960s. It could work. I think it really could. The other reason I'm really for this is I think it could be a real sort of proper new spin and a new trend people could start doing. Now, for the record, people are going to say to me, well, Henry, there's The Man from U.N.C.L.E. they did recently in 2015, which is so good. There's Atomic Blonde, Charlize Theron did, which is really good. Yeah. But, you know, they've been great, but they've been stylized and they haven't really gone anywhere. James Bond, going back in time in doing something like this, could set a whole new trend of like, you know what? You know, let's do different time periods. Let's say you have a Bond film in the 60s and the 70s and 80s again. Each new film is a different time period and do something with it and interesting and relevant. And maybe other franchises might do that. You know, when James Bond franchise started, it was a trend. It was a trendsetter. You know, it started a whole new thing. The Bond franchise can do that again and set to things. You know what? You could now do a Batman film again in the 1970s. You could do a Mission Impossible film if you wanted to. Go back to when it started in the 60s and do something with that if you wanted to. Heck, I'm going to try something completely opposite. You can do a new Rocky film, but this time set into the 1920s. You know, you could do all this stuff. You know, and the Bond series can just sort of lead the charge. And that's another thing, actually, when you think about it as well. Bringing James Bond back into these time periods, specifically the 1960s, it will allow a different type of character. It will allow the new actor to really separate himself from his predecessors again and allow a new spin, a new take, and a new way of approaching this. I think that's really, really important. The other thing I was just literally thinking about right off the bat here as well is another reason why I really like this idea is one of the things in the recent Bond films is obviously you can just track Bond, you can get easy communication, you know, obviously with mobile phones and, you know, everything. Take Bond back in time again and he's on his own again, you know, relying on his wits and his allies. I really like that idea, everybody. So yeah, there are just some ideas of why I think actually going back in time with James Bond would be a terrific idea. And I think actually a potential way the franchise could go. I can imagine, let's say, just for the sake of variety, James Norton as cast as James Bond. You know, they set his first film in the 1950s and the next one in the 60s and the 70s, or just do them all again in the 60s. It could really be an interesting thing and just something completely different and feel really fresh and new for the franchise and for cinema in general. But I want to know, everybody, what are your thoughts about this? Do you like my idea? Do you think I'm really off the mark? I want to know. Comment down below and tell what you think about the idea of maybe taking the franchise forward by going back in time. As always, everybody, my name's Henry Stevens, and this has been some Bond Geek Talks About. Goodbye.